We have received word that music legend Ozzy Osbourne has died. Osbourne, as you know, pioneered.
He was struggling for a long time. So if you get a debilitating disease like Parkinson's and just slow.
Rock legend Ozzy Osbourne is gone, and the world is still in shock. But it was Sharon Osbourne's final words, whispered through tears at his casket, that left the entire room frozen in silence. What did she say that even Marilyn Manson couldn't hold back tears? Why did she beg for forgiveness in front of family and friends? And what was Ozzy hiding in his final days that only Sharon knew? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear might just change everything you thought you knew about the Prince of Darkness. The streets of Birmingham have never been this quiet, yet never this loud with love. Tens of thousands of fans line the roads chanting, "Ozzy! Ozzy!" as the hearse carrying his body made its slow journey through the heart of his hometown. From teenagers in vintage Black Sabbath tees to old-school rockers who grew up with him, everyone stood shoulder to shoulder, united in grief and gratitude. The procession passed through Lodge Road in Aston, where Ozzy grew up. In a touching gesture, the current owners of his childhood home placed a framed photo of him in the front window. Fans stopped to lay down flowers, letters, and even guitar picks. For many, this wasn't just about music. It was about saying goodbye to someone who made them feel understood. Then came the moment that brought even the toughest to tears. The hearse pulled up to Black Sabbath Bridge, a place named in honor of the band that started it all. The bridge was lined with thousands of handwritten notes, vinyl sleeves, candles, and a sea of black roses. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a message. You changed our lives, and we will never forget you. But this public mourning was only the beginning. What came next was far more private and far more emotional. As the family arrived at Black Sabbath Bridge, the chants grew softer. The moment was heavy. Sharon Osbourne, dressed in all black, stepped out of the car and paused. For a second, she just stood there, motionless, staring at the mountain of tributes fans had left behind. Flowers, candles, letters, even tattooed arms reaching out just for a glimpse of her. And then she broke. For years, Sharon was the rock behind the madness, the one who held everything together when Ozzy couldn't. But here, in front of the crowd, she didn't try to hide it. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the hand of one of her children and walked slowly across the bridge. Those around her say she whispered something through her sobs, just loud enough for her family to hear, something she'd never said out loud before. We don't know exactly what was said at that moment, but what happened next at the funeral would give us a powerful clue. Because hours later, in a private, heavily guarded ceremony far away from cameras and fans, Sharon stood before her husband's casket. And what she whispered there would leave everyone in the room completely silent. But before we get to that, let's go inside the secret funeral, the gathering of rock legends, and the emotional chaos that unfolded behind closed doors. You wouldn't know it from the outside, but behind the tall hedges and wrought iron gates of the Osbourne family estate, history was unfolding. This wasn't just a funeral. It was a gathering of rock and roll royalty. Security was airtight. Private guards, surveillance drones, even dog handlers patrolled the massive 250-acre property. The skies had opened up with a light rain earlier in the day, so giant white awnings were set up over the seating area. But the atmosphere wasn't somber. It was reverent, respectful, heavy. Elton John arrived quietly, sunglasses on, head low. Metallica's James Hetfield was seen in deep conversation with Black Sabbath legends Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi. The surviving bandmates hadn't shared a stage with Ozzy since 2005. But here they were, not to play, but to say goodbye. Slipknot frontman Corey Taylor stood off to the side, his face unreadable. And Marilyn Manson, yes, that Marilyn Manson, stood completely still, staring into the distance, as if time had stopped. Even rising star Youngblood, who had grown close to Ozzy in his final years, delivered a reading that left the crowd visibly shaken. Few expected someone so young to speak with such raw emotion, but he did. And then came the centerpiece of the ceremony, that massive floral tribute that had been seen at the public procession, spelling out Ozzy in blood-red roses, was now perched beside a quiet fountain on the property. As the guests gathered around, it became clear this wasn't just a memorial. This was Ozzy's final performance, and every detail had been set exactly the way he wanted it. But the most haunting part wasn't the flowers, it wasn't the music, it was what Ozzy had planned for his body. Because buried deep in his autobiography, he left specific instructions, strange ones, and Sharon followed them to the letter. It was the moment no one thought they'd ever witness again. Ozzy's Black Sabbath brothers, reunited not on a stage, but around his casket. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward. They weren't wearing show clothes. There were no guitars. Just solemn expressions and quiet nods that said everything words never could. For decades, they had defined genre. Together, they invented heavy metal. Together, they changed music forever. And now, together, they were saying goodbye to the man who gave it a soul. Zakk Wylde, Ozzy's longtime guitarist and perhaps his most loyal musical partner, laid down a single black rose at the foot of the casket. No words, just a slow, quiet bow. Even Rob Zombie was there, noticeably shaken. These weren't just musicians paying tribute, they were brothers, grieving one of their own. Then came the most surreal moment. A floral display, arranged to spell out Ozzy in massive red and white lettering, was quietly floated onto the center of the Osbourne Lake, just like Ozzy had envisioned it. As the wind picked up and the lake rippled, the tribute began to drift slowly across the water. It was haunting. It was perfect. And in that silence, something else became clear. Ozzy didn't want to be remembered for his chaos. He wanted to be remembered for his heart. Because buried deep in one of his books, Ozzy had written something bizarre, but deeply human. His final request. And Sharon made sure it happened exactly the way he wanted it.
Long before Ozzy's health began to decline, he had already mapped out how he wanted to go. And true to form, it was weird, wild, and deeply personal. "I've said to Sharon, don't cremate me, whatever you do," he once wrote in his autobiography. "I want to be put in the ground in a nice garden somewhere, with a tree planted over my head. A crabapple tree, preferably." It's such a specific request, almost laughable coming from the man who bit the head off a bat. But that was Ozzy. Outrageous on stage, soft in private. That crabapple tree wasn't just a random choice. It was a symbol, of roots, of home, of returning to the earth quietly, even after a life that was anything but. But he didn't stop there. He even imagined his headstone. "If I close my eyes, I can already see it," he wrote. Ozzy Osbourne, born 1948, died whenever he bit the head off of a bat. Dark humor, always, even in death. But it was what came after that turned his final resting place into something unforgettable. The garden, the lake, the floral tribute drifting in the wind, his family all around him. He didn't want a funeral drenched in grief. He wanted a celebration. And just 3 weeks before his death, Ozzy got exactly that. One last chance to thank his fans, to return home, and to say goodbye. And if you were watching closely, it almost felt like he knew it would be the last time. On July 5th, just 3 weeks before his death, Ozzy Osbourne walked onto a stage one last time. It wasn't a world tour, it wasn't a stadium packed with pyrotechnics. It was something quieter, more intimate, more final. Villa Park Stadium, Birmingham, his hometown. More than 42,000 fans had gathered, not knowing this would be the last time they'd ever see him perform. Ozzy stepped out slowly, visibly weakened, but when he grabbed the mic, the crowd erupted because they didn't see a man in pain, they saw a legend standing tall one last time. And then it happened. The reunion no one expected. His original Black Sabbath bandmates joined him on stage. For the first time since 2005, the band was whole again, if only for a moment. Ozzy didn't sing like he used to. He didn't need to. Just being there was enough. Fans wept in the stands. Grown men clutched each other during Iron Man. And as the final notes rang out, Ozzy stood at the center of the stage and looked out across the sea of faces. "You have no idea how I feel," he said. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart." He didn't say goodbye, but he didn't need to. As he walked off stage for the last time, a message lit up across the Jumbotron. "Thank you for everything. You guys are amazing. Birmingham forever." No one knew it then, but that wasn't just a performance. It was a farewell letter. And behind the scenes, those closest to him knew it too, including Marilyn Manson, who was there not just as a fan, but as a friend. And what he shared after the funeral would reveal a side of Ozzy that fans had rarely seen. When Marilyn Manson walked into the funeral, many expected spectacle. After all, these were two of rock's most controversial icons, men who shocked the world, terrified parents, and redefined rebellion. But what fans got from Manson was something entirely different. He didn't speak at the ceremony. He didn't perform. He stood quietly, off to the side, wearing all black, his signature dark eyeliner barely hiding the redness around his eyes. And after the service, he shared a message that stunned everyone who read it. "Today, we laid to rest a beloved friend," he wrote. "I'm eternally grateful that you let me into your life, Ozzy. Your inspiration and love will always be with me. Thank you, Sharon and family, for a reverent, beautiful ceremony. Your legacy lives on." There was no sarcasm, no theatrics, just gratitude, respect, love. It was the kind of message that reminded everyone who Ozzy really was beyond the scandals, beyond the stage persona. He was a father, a husband, a mentor, and for people like Manson, a lifeline. Other musicians present reportedly held back tears. Youngblood, who had once called Ozzy his rock dad, wept openly after his reading. Zakk Wylde didn't say a word the entire afternoon, just clutched a single photo of them backstage from years ago. Everyone grieves differently, but what united them that day wasn't just sadness, it was reverence. Ozzy didn't just leave behind music. He left behind a generation of artists who owed everything to him. And yet, one moment still lingered. One moment nobody could forget. It was the quietest moment of the entire day, when the crowd had thinned, when the speeches were over, when the music had stopped. That was when Sharon approached the casket and whispered something that shook everyone who heard it. The room was still. Cameras were gone. Only the closest family and friends remained. And there, by the casket, Sharon Osbourne leaned in close to her husband's resting place and whispered words so powerful they stopped everyone in their tracks. No one outside that circle knows exactly what she said, but those present describe it as raw, heartbreaking, and deeply honest. A confession, a plea, maybe even forgiveness.
Rumors suggest Sharon whispered, "I'm sorry for all the times I couldn't protect you." Words heavy with years of struggle, pain, and love. For decades, Sharon was Ozzy's protector and fiercest defender, navigating storms of addiction, scandal, and public battles. But in that moment, surrounded by those who truly understood their journey, she let down her guard. Some say it was the first time she admitted the toll it took on her. Others believe it was her way of saying goodbye, not just to Ozzy, but to the man behind the legend. No matter the exact words, one thing is clear. That whisper wasn't just a goodbye. It was an echo of a lifetime spent loving fiercely, protecting desperately, and mourning deeply. And as the funeral came to a close, those in attendance left with a profound sense that Ozzy Osbourne's story, while ending here, will continue to live in the hearts of millions.
Ozzy Osbourne didn't just live loud. He left loud. From the raw power of his music to the complex man behind the madness, his legacy is more than just legendary riffs and wild stories. It's the love of a family, the loyalty of friends, and the devotion of millions of fans worldwide. His funeral was not just a farewell. It was a celebration of a life that refused to be quiet or forgotten. Sharon's whispered words remind us all that behind every icon, there is a human story filled with struggle, forgiveness, and deep, unspoken love. As fans continue to grieve and honor his memory, one question remains. Will there be a public service for fans to say goodbye? We'll keep you updated the moment we hear anything. For now, Ozzy's spirit lives on, in his music, in his family, and in every heart that was touched by the Prince of Darkness. If you want to stay updated on the latest news and exclusive stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.